Hi, my name is Emily Carter. I'm 27 years old, and I grew up believing I had to be quiet to be loved. Before I tell you what happened, subscribe if you believe sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought overseas. They're fought at your own dinner table. Because this story didn't start in the army. It started in my father's garage. I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, not the polished, suburban Tulsa. The working class side. Trucks in driveways, rusted toolboxes, lawn chairs on cracked concrete. My dad, Mark Carter, worked construction his entire life. Steel beams, highway overpasses, concrete pours at sunrise. His hands looked like they were carved out of oak, his knuckles permanently scarred. His voice carried authority even when he wasn't trying. In our house, strength had a definition. It meant lifting something heavy, fixing something broken, never complaining, never crying, never needing help. And unfortunately, it meant being a son. I had two older brothers, Jason and Cole. Jason was the football hero, quarterback. Dad never missed a game. Cole rebuilt engines in our garage by 16. They didn't just look like my dad. They moved like him, spoke like him, laughed like him. And then there was me. I didn't like grease. I didn't like football. I didn't like loud. I liked patterns. When I was 10 years old, I found a dusty Spanish workbook at a garage sale. 50 cents, torn cover, missing pages. I sat on the porch that afternoon while my brothers tossed a football in the yard and started sounding out words. Hola, casa, ventana. Something clicked in my brain. It wasn't about the words themselves, it was about the structure. How meaning could live inside different sounds, how the same thought could exist in a different shape. That night at dinner, I said, "Did you know window is ventana in Spanish?" My dad chewed his steak, barely looking up. "That nice," he said flatly. That was the moment I learned something important. If what I loved didn't look strong, it wasn't interesting. But I kept going anyway. By middle school, I was checking language CDs out of the public library. French this time. I practiced pronunciation quietly in my room in high school. I discovered Arabic on YouTube, not because anyone around me spoke it, not because it was required, but because it was hard. The script looked like art. The sounds came from deep in the throat. It didn't bend easily, and I liked that. I liked earning it. I started taping sticky notes with Arabic letters around my bedroom mirror, my closet door, my desk lamp. One afternoon, Dad walked past my room and stopped. "What's all that scribble?" "It's Arabic." He stared at the letters for a few seconds. "Why?" I shrugged. "I just want to learn it." He shook his head and walked away. "You're gonna waste that brain on something useless." Useless! That word stayed with me. If you've ever loved something someone else called useless, subscribe right now, because you know that quiet sting. Fast forward to college. I majored in linguistics at the University of Oklahoma. I worked part-time at a campus coffee shop, maintained a near-perfect GPA, spent late nights analyzing phonetic shifts and language families while my roommates partied. Dad never came to visit campus. He'd ask on the phone, "So what job does that degree get you?" I didn't have a simple answer, and that bothered him. During my senior year, one of my professors pulled me aside. "You've got exceptional auditory discrimination," he said. "Have you considered military intelligence?" I laughed at first. Me? Military? But then he explained the Defense Language Institute, the need for linguists, the way language specialists operate in high-level intelligence roles. Something inside me locked in. It wasn't about war, it was about application, purpose, my skills actually mattering. That night, I drove home and told my parents at dinner, I'm thinking about enlisting in the army as a linguist. Asterisk, the fork stopped halfway to my dad's mouth. Silence. Then he laughed. Not amused. Not proud. Dismissive. You? He said. Emily, you get overwhelmed ordering at a drive-thru sometimes. My brothers chuckled. I felt my face burn. I've been researching it, I said carefully. They need language analysts. He leaned back in his chair. The army isn't a study club. You think war cares about grammar? I tried to explain the intelligence side. He waved his hand. You won't last through basic. It wasn't cruel, it was certain. Like he was stating gravity, and something in me snapped. Not loudly, quietly. Because it wasn't just about the army. It was about him deciding my limits. If you're still watching, subscribe. Because what I did next changed everything. 2 months later, I walked into a recruiter's office alone, signed the papers, scheduled my departure. Dad didn't come. He told my brothers, she'll be back in 6 months. The night before I left, I stood in the garage. He was tightening bolts on an engine block. I ship out tomorrow, I said. He didn't look up. You don't have to prove anything, he muttered. That's when I realized something. He thought I was doing this to prove him wrong. But I wasn't. I was doing it because for the first time in my life I saw a version of myself that wasn't small. The morning I left, Mom cried. Dad shook my hand. Not a hug, a handshake. Don't embarrass yourself, he said. And that was it. As the bus pulled away, I looked out the window and made myself a promise. I wouldn't quit. Not because of pride, not because of anger, but because I refused to let someone else define what strength looked like for me. And I had no idea that one day, in a room full of soldiers, the man who doubted me most would be the one left speechless. Asterisk, if you want to go even deeper into basic training, deployment pressure, and the moment that shifted everything, subscribe and tell me. And before I continue, let me ask you something. If your parent told you that you wouldn't survive something you believed in, would you still go? Or would you shrink to fit their expectations? Comment below. Asterisk, before I continue, if you've ever walked into a room where no one thought you belonged, subscribe. Because this part nearly broke me. Basic training. Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Humidity so thick it felt like you were breathing through wet fabric. The air smelled like dirt, sweat, and metal. The first night, they shaved our hair tight. Not completely bald for the women, but enough that I barely recognized myself in the mirror. I stared at my reflection and thought, you asked for this. Day 1 started at 4:30 a.m. The lights flipped on like an explosion. Drill Sergeant Hargrave's voice filled the barracks. Get up. You have 10 seconds. I had never moved that fast in my life. The first week wasn't physically impossible. It was mentally violent. You are stripped of comfort, stripped of identity, stripped of control. One afternoon during rifle drills, a guy in my platoon named Mercer leaned over and said, So what are you here for? Medic, admin, linguist, I replied. He snorted. Cute. That word again, cute, like I was a hobby. Like I was temporary. I didn't argue. I outperformed. I ran until my lungs burned. Did extra push-ups after lights out. Studied battle drills in the bathroom under dim lighting. Because I could feel something in the air. They were waiting for me to quit. And somewhere back in Oklahoma, my dad probably was too. Asterisk, if you've ever Felt like people were quietly betting against you. Subscribe. You understand this pressure. By week 3, the exhaustion became constant. Not sharp, just heavy. Blisters on my heels cracked open during ruck marches. My shoulders bruised under 40-pound packs. My hands trembled from overuse. But that wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was silence at night, when everyone else slept. My brain replayed my father's voice. You won't last. And here's the part I haven't told many people. There was a moment, one moment, during a 12-mile ruck march in pouring rain. It was dark. Mud sucked at our boots. My calves were shaking uncontrollably. I slipped, fell face first into the mud. My pack slammed into my spine. For a split second, I stayed there, and I thought I could just stop. Medical discharge. Go home. Say it wasn't for me, Dad would say. Told you. And life would go back to normal. That was the temptation. Not quitting because I couldn't. Quitting because it would restore comfort. But then something strange happened. Drill Sergeant Hargrove stopped in front of me. He didn't yell. He just said quietly, "Specialist Carter, you choosing to stay down?" Not mocking, not angry, just asking. And in that moment, I realized something. Nobody was forcing me. This was my choice. So I stood up, mud dripping off my face, and I finished that march. I didn't finish first. I didn't finish last. But I finished. That day changed something in me. Because I learned I don't collapse under pressure. I negotiate with it. After graduation from basic, we had a short ceremony. Nothing grand. Just flags and uniforms. I scanned the crowd. No dad. Asterisk he texted. Congrats. What's next? No pride. No warmth. Just logistics. What was next was the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California. And if basic broke your body, DLI breaks your brain. 6 hours of immersive language training per day. Native speakers correcting every syllable. Weekly oral exams that determine whether you stay or get reclassified. Arabic isn't forgiving. One vowel shift changes an entire sentence. One misplaced emphasis signals you as foreign immediately. The first month, I struggled not with MEMO or IZATION. With speed, the instructors spoke rapidly. My brain couldn't catch up. One afternoon during a live dialect session, I froze mid-response. The instructor raised an eyebrow. Carter, you're behind. Behind. That word hit harder than I expected. That night, I called home. Dad answered. How's the army? He asked. It's intense. You thinking about coming back? He didn't say it cruelly. He said it casually, like it was reasonable, and for a moment, I almost said yes. But something inside me resisted. No, I replied. I'm staying. He sighed. Well, just don't waste too much time. Waste. There it was again. I hung up and sat in silence. And I made another promise. I would not allow the word waste to define my path. If you're still here, subscribe. Because what happened next is where everything started to shift. I changed my study strategy. Instead of memorizing lists, I started listening to regional news broadcasts at 1.5 speed. I shadowed native speakers' audio until my tongue stopped fighting the sounds. I recorded myself and dissected my own pronunciation. I treated it like athletic training. Reps, consistency, incremental improvement. 3 months later, something clicked. During a surprise oral evaluation, the instructor switched dialect mid-conversation. I followed it seamlessly. He stopped, looked at me for a long second, then nodded once. Good recovery. It wasn't applause, but it was respect. and respect felt better than validation by graduation. I ranked near the top of my cohort. We stood in formation overlooking the Pacific Ocean, waves crashing against cliffs, and for the first time in my life, I felt something steady inside me, not anger, not defiance, confidence, not loud confidence, quiet certainty. When I called home to tell Dad I'd be deploying in support of intelligence operations, his voice changed slightly. Deploying. He repeated. Yes. There was a pause, and for the first time, he didn't laugh. He just said, "Be careful." That was new, but I didn't know yet that deployment would test everything I thought I had built, and that one night overseas would make a room full of soldiers stand up for me and leave my father completely silent. Before going next, let me ask you, have you ever stayed in something just long enough to prove to yourself you could? Not to anyone else, just to you. Comment below and subscribe. Before I continue, subscribe if you believe strength isn't always loud. Because this part of my life didn't look powerful from the outside, but it carried weight. Deployment didn't feel heroic. It felt beige. Beige walls, beige tents, beige dust that coated everything. Your boots, your eyelashes, your lungs. We were stationed at a forward operating base that didn't make the news. Intelligence rarely does. If it works, nothing happens. And when nothing happens, nobody knows why. My job wasn't kicking doors or carrying a rifle on patrol. It was sitting in a dim operations room wearing a headset for hours at a time, listening to static, to fragmented calls, to coded phrases, to voices that didn't know I was there. It sounds dramatic. It isn't. It's repetitive. It's isolating. It's mentally exhausting in a way physical strain never is. You can't zone out. You can't assume. You can't miss nuance, because nuance is everything. And here's what most people don't understand about language. Words aren't just words. They carry geography, education, tribe, intent, emotion. Two men can say the same sentence, and one vowel difference tells you which side of a border they grew up on. That's what I trained for. Weeks passed without anything major. Routine intercepts, routine analysis, routine reports, and slowly, doubt crept in again. Was this meaningful? Was I overestimating my role? Was my father right? Was this all theoretical? One night during a video call home, Dad asked, "So what do you actually do all day?" I tried to explain. We analyze communication patterns. We flag inconsistencies. He paused. "So, you listen to phone calls?" It sounded so small when he said it like that. Double quotes, yes. I replied quietly. "Well," he said, "I guess someone's gotta do it." Not dismissive, but not impressed. After we hung up, I stared at the blank laptop screen. And I felt something uncomfortable, not anger, not sadness, something closer to invisibility. If you've ever done something important that nobody understood, subscribe. This part is for you. Then came the night everything changed. It was late, past midnight. Most of the base was asleep inside the operations room. The only light came from monitors and red standby LEDs. I was reviewing an intercepted call flagged low priority to male voices discussing transportation logistics. Nothing overt, nothing urgent, but something in my chest tightened. The cadence was wrong. Arabic dialects have rhythm, and this rhythm felt forced, like someone wearing a borrowed accent. I replayed the clip. Then again. The first speaker used Gulf-based vocabulary, but his consonant emphasis leaned levantine, subtle but real, Like someone claiming to be from Texas but slipping into New Jersey vowels mid-sentence. I isolated specific phonetic markers. One phrase, Inshallah Bukra, sounded natural, but the way he pronounced the cough sound, that wasn't regional to where he claimed to be. It was masked, deliberately. I leaned back in my chair. My heart was racing, and I didn't know why. I brought it to my team lead. Sir, I think this is staged. He barely looked up. Staged how? There. Disguising origin. The accent doesn't align with claimed location. He exhaled. It's flagged low level. Carter. I understand, sir. But the dialect layering doesn't make sense. He studied me for a moment. There's a look people give you when they're deciding whether you're competent or dramatic. He forwarded the clip up the chain, reluctantly, to hours later. Everything accelerated. Signals intelligence cross-checked the coordinates. Movement patterns aligned. Human sources corroborated irregular behavior. It wasn't transportation logistics. It was route reconnaissance for an insider attack, scheduled the next morning, on a patrol unit that included 6 soldiers from a sister company. If that patrol had gone out, I don't finish that sentence easily. The mission was adjusted overnight. Interception occurred. No casualties, no explosion, no folded flags, no letters home, just a quiet operational shift. The next afternoon, I was called into the captain's office. His desk was simple. No dramatic decor. He closed the door. Specialist Carter, walk me through what you heard. I explained the phonetics, the regional masking, the vowel shifts, the stressed consonants. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back. Do you understand what you prevented? I swallowed. Asterisk, sir. You prevented a casualty report. The room felt smaller. He wasn't praising theatrically, he was stating fact. And in that moment, something inside me recalibrated. My work wasn't small, it was invisible. And invisible doesn't mean unimportant. That night in the barracks, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time, I didn't hear my father's laugh in my head. I heard something else, a clarity weeks later, when I called home and cautiously told Dad about it. Not details, just that an analysis prevented something serious. He was quiet, longer than usual. Then he said, well, I guess that studying wasn't useless after all. It wasn't pride. But it wasn't dismissal either. That it was a crack in the wall. And sometimes cracks are where change starts. Deployment continued. More long nights. More audio files. More responsibility. Word spread quietly within the unit. Carter catches patterns. I didn't chase recognition. I chased precision. Because now I understood something deeply. Strength isn't volume. Strength is vigilance. Strength is paying attention when others overlook. When I rotated back stateside months later, I wasn't the same person who had left. Not hardened. Not cynical, sharper, more grounded. And unknowingly, walking toward the moment that would silence my father completely. Because 2 years later, in a modest ceremony hall back home, a single sentence would shift everything. Asterisk before moving next. Let me ask you something honestly. If your skill saved lives but nobody applauded, would that still be enough for you? Comment below and subscribe. Because the next part isn't about the battlefield. It's about the moment validation finally showed up and what it did to both of us. Before I continue, if you've ever waited years for someone to finally see you, subscribe, because this part still makes my chest tighten when I think about it. 2 years after that night overseas, I was notified I'd be receiving an Army Commendation Medal for Sustained Intelligence Impact. Not a Purple Heart, not a Bronze Star, but earned, documented, real. The citation referenced exceptional linguistic analysis contributing to force protection. Force protection, a clinical way of saying, people came home alive. The ceremony was scheduled at a small base auditorium in Oklahoma. Nothing flashy. Rows of folding chairs, American flag, podium, a handful of officers in dress blues. I almost didn't invite my dad. Part of me didn't want the risk. What if he treated it like another school recital? What if he showed up emotionally absent again? But another part of me, the part that was still 10 years old holding a Spanish workbook, wanted him there, so I invited him. He said he'd come, no excitement, no hesitation, just, okay. The morning of the ceremony, I stood in my dress uniform staring at myself in the mirror. The fabric was pressed sharp, metal ribbons aligned perfectly, hair secured tight. I didn't look like the girl from the porch anymore. I looked steady, composed, earned. When I walked into the auditorium, I scanned the room. My mom was smiling nervously. My brothers stood near the back, arms folded. And then I saw him, third row, hands clasped, posture straight, watching, not distracted, not dismissive. Watching, my heart started pounding. Not because of the medal, because this felt like a test I hadn't studied for. The ceremony began. A few other soldiers were recognized first. Routine, applause, handshake, photo. Then my name was called. Specialist Emily Carter. I stepped forward. My boots sounded louder than usual against the polished floor. My captain began reading the citation, but then he stopped. He folded the paper, and he spoke without it. Most people think war is noise, he said. Gunfire, explosions, movement. He paused. But sometimes war is listening. The room quieted. There are soldiers who fight without firing a weapon. Soldiers whose awareness prevents letters being delivered to families. My throat tightened. Specialist Carter's linguistic analysis identified dialect masking in a low-priority intercept, leading to the disruption of a planned insider attack. You could hear the air shift. Not dramatic, just weight settling. Then, he said it. 6 words. Her mind is our strongest defense. Silence. Not confused silence. Respect silence. I felt my father's presence before I looked at him. When I turned slightly, he wasn't blinking. He wasn't nodding. He wasn't smiling. He looked stunned, not embarrassed, not defensive, recalculating. My captain pinned the medal onto my uniform. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of returning to the podium, he stepped down, walked directly to the 3rd row to my father. It extended his hand. Sir, he said calmly, thank you for raising her. Time slowed. My dad stood up automatically. Their hands shook, firm, respectful, and in that moment, something cracked open. Because my father had always believed he understood strength. He understood weight, heat, endurance. But here stood a senior Army officer thanking him for raising a daughter whose strength was intellectual precision. My father turned toward me, and for the first time in my entire life he saluted me. Not joking, not half-hearted, a full, correct salute. The room watched. I returned it, and something inside me, something I didn't even know was still bracing, relaxed. If that moment hits you in the chest, subscribe, because validation, when it finally comes, can feel like oxygen. After the ceremony, people mingled. Photos were taken. Handshakes exchanged. My brothers clapped me on the back. Guess you're tougher than you look, Jason joked. But Dad didn't say anything at first. He just stood beside me quietly, studying the medal, studying the uniform, studying me. On the drive home, we rode in his truck, no radio, just road noise. 10 miles passed, then 20, finally. He cleared his throat. I was wrong. 3 words, simple, heavy. I thought the world would crush you, he continued. I thought you were too soft. I stared out the window. It tried, I said quietly. He nodded slowly. I didn't understand what you were building. I thought strength only looked one way. He paused, and I didn't want to admit I didn't understand it. That was the most honest thing he had ever said to me. Weeks later, I visited home again. He had framed the ceremony photo. It sat between Jason's football trophy and Cole's welding certification, equal, not below. Not tucked away, equal, sometimes now. He asks me to say something in Arabic, not to test me, just to hear it. Curiosity replaced dismissal. Respect replaced doubt. And here's the part I still wrestle with. If I had quit during that ruck march, if I had come home when DLI overwhelmed me, if I had chosen comfort over conviction, would those 6 soldiers have made it home? Would my father ever have redefined strength? Or would we both have stayed stuck inside old definitions? So now I want to ask you, did I do the right thing by walking my own path without waiting for his approval? Or should I have tried harder to convince him first? If you were in my place, would you have enlisted anyway? Would you have endured the doubt? Would you have stayed long enough to let excellence speak for you? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know. And if this story meant something to you, if you've ever carried someone else's low expectations on your back, subscribe. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving someone wrong. It's showing them a version of strength they never imagined. And sometimes, the loudest apology you'll ever hear is a silent salute.